Hello and welcome to Say Hi to the Future, Ingenious Thinkers, a podcast aimed at highlighting the human side of ingenuity. My name is Ken Tencer, curator of Say Hi to the Future, helping leaders think differently in the face of uncertainty and ambiguity. Better thinking, better outcomes. With me today is Mark McGrath, Chief Learning Officer at AGLX, a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business that provides tools and methods for confident and agile decision-making and action. Mark McGrath, Chief Learning Officer at AGLX, welcome to Say Hi to the Future.
Thanks, Ken. Thanks for having me.
So, Mark, just starting with AGLX and service-disabled, veteran-owned small business. Tell me about that and what it means and how it came to be for you.
Yeah, so I actually have the first emails years ago where Brian Rivera, his call sign is Ponch, he's a naval aviator. He and I started a conversation on someone that we have a deep mutual interest in, and that was John Boyd. And we had a pretty good discourse and then stayed in touch on LinkedIn. And then an opportunity came up to join the team. And I did so at the beginning of last year in 2023. As you mentioned, service disabled. So all five of us are veterans. Myself, I'm a United States Marine. I served as an officer for 6 years of active duty. Brian is a naval aviator that flew in the fighter aviation community. Our other partner, Chris Alexander, who also came from the naval fighter aviation community. And then Ryan Broman-Schenkel and Shane Albrecht were both officers in the Army. So that's how we have that. That's how we have that designation. And a lot of what we've learned in that experience, that we've learned from the military, it's really profound in the naval branches. I'm a little biased being a Marine. I'm a little biased towards the Navy and the Marine Corps. But basically, how to thrive in nonlinear, asymmetric environments, and how to lead and influence and inspire others in those sorts of environments, so that ultimately they can become the best versions of themselves individually, but also in the teams and the organizations that they are part of.
So Mark, that's an interesting point you made, because I have no service background. So I have that sort of outside looking in understanding of what I would think about in Army or Marines, of that very rigid training, very rigid hierarchy. But as you say, I guess it's more of a juxtaposition of the rigidity with a necessary fluidity, because no one can quite plan for the unbelievable scenarios that you must have seen or been put in.
That's a very apt observation and description. There certainly is a hierarchy. I mean, there certainly are some very rigid rules. There's nuances between the various branches, right? Between the Marine Corps. I have the most experience with the Marine Corps, the Navy, and the Army. My father is a retired Army officer, so I was born on a base, and I was an Army brat basically until I became a commissioned officer in the Marine Corps. We had a lot of military in our family, and just interacting with military people pretty much, really my entire life from birth. Mm-hmm. To your point, there are some rigidities and there are hierarchies, yet each service, I think, has a lot of different nuances on how they handle their various missions. With the Marine Corps specifically, if you know anything about the history of the Marine Corps, you look at the places and the things that the Marines have done in their history. There's nothing that's linear, simple, friendly looking. It's extremely nonlinear, chaotic, complex, volatile, and they equip us with that frame of thinking. That's where I'm sure we'll talk about my work with John Boyd's theories, but that's how John Boyd came to the Marine Corps. John Boyd was a retired Air Force officer and came from that culture. Yet the things that he was talking about was a very interesting click for the Marine Corps, because the Marine Corps has always been an extremely self-reflective, highly adaptive, highly mobile, highly fluid organization. So whereas say some of the services might give, they take a big giant book and say, here's everything that you can do and not do and don't do, anything outside of this book and everything. Whereas the Marine Corps is more like, here's a little card of the things you could never do under any circumstances. And other than that, you're free to do whatever you want to get the mission done. So it always came down to mission in that respect. And to your point about being fluid in the Marine Corps, especially, decision making is pushed down to the lowest level of leadership. So what that ultimately does is it empowers the whole team. It brings a lot of speed and adaptability to the organization because I don't have to micromanage down through a rigid structure of hierarchical leadership. There's an implicit trust and a mutual trust that things are going to happen so long as they're in line with the mission. And really, what it boils down to, and this I teach leadership classes at a university's executive education program, but I say this class is geared towards leadership, the title, so that I can teach you leadership, the quality. And leadership, the quality is what every Marine has and what every Marine learns from the very beginning. And I like to say that every human has leadership qualities and leadership potentials, and we have to bring that quality out as we interact with others. So that's how it becomes fluid. That's where the speed comes from. That's where the deliberate direction comes from. And that's where I think ultimately the ability to thrive in those sorts of nonlinear, asymmetric, chaotic environments comes from that.
And when you describe that, Mark, it seems to me that unfortunately business doesn't understand the true nature, true qualities that somebody retiring from the service can bring to business, whether it's a highly regulated industry that maybe needs that big, thick book, or maybe it's regulated, but within innovation or within whatever, or it's a more rapidly changing industry. You need that one pager. I don't know what your experience is, but it just, I've been in business a long time. I am aware, have worked with or hired, but I just don't think people understand the depth of experience and applicable skills.
I would agree. I spent almost 20 years on Wall Street in the asset management world, working for firms that managed money for institutions, individuals. And to your point, that view, there's a lot of hostility in cases. There's a lot of animosity, but I think really what it boils down to is there's a massive misunderstanding of what you actually learn in the military. I think that oftentimes it gets pigeonholed where they would say, well, he must be really good at waking up early and, staying in shape or, being comfortable, being uncomfortable. And that's all true. I wake up every day at 4:15 still, and I do master swimming, and I do a lot of crazy things that, people don't do. And maybe Marines are a little more prone to do, but that's not enough. I mean, really what it comes down to, I think, is that there's a frame of thinking, a way of thinking that's misunderstood. And,
Right.
A couple firms that I've worked for over the years, like they would be extraordinarily dismissive of anything that was learned in the military. So like John Boyd's theories, for example, I mean, these are theories that are applicable everywhere humans are making decisions, particularly useful and practical in asymmetric nonlinear environments. I'm not familiar of a place other than the military that's as good a place at that as capital markets. And again, spending almost 20 years there, seeing the constant change, the constant flux, the constant volatility. What I learned in the Marine Corps was not only practically useful for me, it was also practically useful for me as I taught and showed our clients and helped them understand that. So they in turn could take care of their clients, who were the institutions or retail investors that they were dealing with. And it all came down to like, how do you view volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity?
Right.
And if you orient to it effectively, it actually becomes a massive advantage. It becomes a massive advantage for collaboration. It becomes a massive advantage for creativity. It becomes a massive advantage for competition. And I tell people this all the time, and it's not hyperbole, that if you don't learn these things, if you don't explore these concepts, and if you misunderstand them, but your competitors do, you're in a lot of trouble.
Mm-hmm. So I'm hearing both. I'm hearing the corporate level, as you just mentioned, about what you understand, what your competitors understand, and how engaging in your line of thought or your approach to uncertainty and asymmetric is critical on that sort of global corporate level. But I'm also hearing something that on a day-to-day level is absolutely essential and is contrary to what I think we all learned in business or all practice in business. And certainly, unfortunately, not unfortunately, I was taught a certain way in business school, multiple jaunts at business school. And that is the necessity of teamwork and trust in terms of uncertain and asymmetrical situations. And it's all about, no matter what we say, getting ahead, one-upmanship.
Mm.
And that does not work in an uncertain, ambiguous situation where you have to have absolute trust that the people around you support you and the goals that the overall, company is going for.
Well, a lot to unpack there. So,
Yeah. Sorry, I rambled a bit.
I guess the thing I would start with, and I say this so much, it's a very reflexive thing for me to say. The theories, the universal concepts of complexity that I learned in the Marine Corps, that I study, developing the theories of John Boyd and others. These theories only apply where humans are present making decisions. Everything we do at AGLX, everything that we talk about with clients, everything we talk about with teammates is 100% human-centered first. John Boyd's mandate was people, ideas, things, always in that order. So everything is focused on the person first, internally on say a business organization or a military organization or a football team or a hockey team or anything like that, and externally to our fans, to our clients, to our family members, to our customers, right? It's people, ideas, things, always people, ideas, things in that order. Not that we don't have ideas and not that we don't use things and technology, because we're not Luddites. It's how do things and ideas serve humans, and that's the fundamental thing. Now, the cool thing about it is, as you say, there's the corporate level, and then there's the day-to-day essential. Is say maybe a team of two of us, or maybe it's a couple, or maybe it's the starting six on a hockey line or something like that. It's fractal and it scales. It scales as an individual, and it scales all the way up to the highest level of any human organization. So back to my example earlier of the Marine Corps, scales what we learn as an individual Marine, scales all the way up to the highest level of the entire Marine Corps, because the human-centered concepts, the human-centered principles are fractal, no matter how big or small. If it's one individual Marine, or a fire team, which would be 4, or a squad, which would be 13, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of those things are fractal, and they scale. To your point about, you're mentioning something about, one-upmanship and gain and all that stuff. The really cool thing about, specifically the Boyd theories and a lot of the Eastern influence that John Boyd had. When we go into it, I used to teach this when I was working in my business life. Every transaction, everybody should be better off. Everybody, in any economic transaction or any type of business transaction, everybody should be better off. Everybody should win. It shouldn't just be one over the other. So, for example, I'm an economist by training. That's my master's degree. I'm a historian undergrad, economist by master's degree, and I've written a lot with a fellow economist by the name of Hunter Hastings. And Hunter and I were combining basically Boyd's theories on orientation to the entrepreneurial theory that emerged from the Austrian School of Economics. And one of the things that you learn in that sort of a classical economic standpoint is that all value transactions, anything, If I'm going to sell you, say this Yeti coffee mug, and I'm going to sell it to you for $10, say. I don't know what rate's better right now, US or Canada, so maybe we'd have to look to see what exactly the price would be. But let's just say you're going to give me money for this. You value this more than the money. I value the money more than this. So we have an exchange where we're actually both better off. I'm not screwing you over selling this to you, and you're not getting one up on me, thinking that you stole this from me. We're actually in a free exchange. We're both better off. And when I was digging into a lot of the Boyd stuff, particularly the Eastern influence, I realized that a lot of these things we're all better off in most cases to everyone's benefit when they're doing this right. Say like Sun Tzu was a huge influence on John Boyd. Sometimes you can win a war without firing a shot, right? Without actually lobbing a missile or shooting a bullet. And think about that. Think about the things that don't happen then. People retain their lives, they retain their liberty, their property, whatever it is. Isn't that cool? Wouldn't everybody be better off? So it's that kind of, I mean, that might be a crude example, but basically that any transaction, everybody should be better off when they engage.
Everyone should be better off and everyone should be slightly unhappy.
Perhaps because that unhappiness is the mismatch, right? That's the uneasiness we feel that inspires us to say create a Yeti, right? Like I'm tired of drinking coffee and it turns cold, or I'm tired of drinking coffee and it burns my hand or whatever. So I'm going to design something to overcome that felt uneasiness that I have and make that better for me as a coffee drinker and make that better for other coffee drinkers. And I'm going to position and communicate that, and people are going to see that they're better off. And as I trade this coffee cup for money, they want the coffee cup more than they want the money. I want the money more than I want the coffee cup, and everybody's better off in the long run.
So Mark, you've mentioned John Boyd a number of times, and we had a pre-discussion, so I know that the incredible influence on you, but it's John Boyd, Colonel John Boyd, a late military strategist whose theories certainly impacted well outside of the military. So tell us about John Boyd, and you can run that into your influences and the business that you're the chief learning officer for.
So at the highest level, John Boyd was a retired Air Force officer. He was a fighter pilot in the Air Force whose strategic theories have had a tremendous amount of influence on organizations, beginning with the Marine Corps, but also really with no limit on industry. Really, as I've said, they apply to anywhere humans are making decisions. Basically, John Boyd's magnum opus was depending on the version that you have, there's, the size of your PDF or Microsoft document or whatever, it's roughly about a 11 to 15 page paper. It's called Destruction and Creation. And I would encourage everybody to read it. And I would encourage anybody that thinks they know about Boyd, if they haven't read Destruction and Creation and they don't understand it, then they don't understand Boyd, because basically from the early 70s till his death in 1997, he riffed off of the theory that he posited inside of this paper. But what he was saying was that systems can't determine their character within themselves. They can't determine their efficacy within themselves. And he relied on three scientific principles for this. The first was the second law of thermodynamics, entropy, that all natural systems generate entropy. The second one was Heisenberg's uncertainty or indeterminacy principle, that I can calculate speed or I can calculate position, but I can't both, just given the nature of uncertainty and the motion of the universe. That's a historian economist's summary of it. And then the last one was Gödel's incompleteness theorem, that we can never have all information, that again, that a system, like a mathematical system, can't prove itself that it's valid or accurate. So basically what he did was fuse those things and say that we can't determine the nature of a system within itself, and attempts to do so amplify confusion, disorder, and friction. So we need to orient and understand that, and understand that our orientation, or that our cognitive software, our human internal operating system, constantly has to be revised and updated, because that cognitive software, that my understanding of the world, my understanding of reality, is what shapes how I see and sense make. And then it shapes how I formulate hypotheses, which are decisions.
Mhm.
And it shapes how I test those decisions through action. And it shapes how I learn. And that's the feedback loops that I get from what I observe. And then if I'm doing it correctly, I'm constantly in this whirl of reorientation. In fact, that's the title of my Substack, which is my my free subscription thing that anybody can get, which is really my outlet for my Boyd passion and developing his theories. The whirl of reorientation comes from a briefing that he had called conceptual spiral, that we need to be in this constant whirl of reorienting, updating, revising our models and our understanding of reality, because if we don't, we will become irrelevant or obsolete or defeated. So we constantly reorient that software by uploading learning, right? Like learning, and if we're learning, then we're adapting. What it comes to is with John Boyd is that most people know him for what's called they say OODA loop. Boyd referred to it as OODA loop in quotes sketch. And if you've listened to our podcast and looked at that, we talk about that, like how Boyd's OODA loop in quotes sketch informs our understanding of reality, and we can use it as an abstraction to help us better understand reality. See, also I got my OODA's on my Yeti, and OODA's also on my Stanley Cup. OODA's everywhere, right? So OODA's only in places where humans are making decisions and actions. For humans that are cognitively capable of sense making, observing, deciding and acting. It's a universal concept. And in the two academic papers I wrote with Hunter Hastings, we posit that's axiomatic, that it's going on whether you understand it or not, or whether you care to understand it or not. These things are occurring, and this goes back to what I was saying earlier. When I can teach an individual, or I can teach a team and help them understand that they're subject to these things anyway, that they're doing it consciously or subconsciously, whether they know it or care or not. If they make the effort to understand how it all works, then they can improve. They can improve their capacity for free and independent action. That would be Boyd's statement in Destruction and Creation. We do these things to improve our capacity for free and independent action. And if they reject that, if they don't want to learn that, if they don't want to understand that, that's fine. If their competitors are, that's bad news, right? If my competitors are learning these things explicitly, and they're taking the time to understand how it all functions in a nonlinear asymmetric environment, whether I'm a football coach, or if I'm a lawyer, or if I'm a doctor, I'm a nurse, if I'm a special needs parent. One of my best students of all time with OODA has a special needs mother that completely gets it, and not one day in the military. Most of the people that I've taught this to, and I see really thrive in it, are actually people that have never spent any time in the military. Again, it's a universal concept. But the point that I was trying to drive home is that, oh yeah, if we're not aware of how it works, and we're not mindful of that, and our competitors are, we're not going to adapt as fast as they are.
Right.
That's why we have if a lot of our podcasts you've heard, it's almost like I say all the time, even in interviews, Blockbuster, because just everybody knows the Blockbuster Netflix story, or Kodak, or Polaroid, or Research in Motion. They know these stories where an orientation froze, or it locked, or it wasn't allowed to be challenged, or assumptions weren't allowed to be challenged, or they weren't allowed to they weren't debriefing, they weren't red teaming, they weren't challenging their assumptions, they weren't interacting with reality, they were isolating instead. And now they're gone and they're relevant. It didn't matter that they were number one in every category in their industry, or number one, doesn't matter, because what winds up happening is, like, I think it was Warren Buffett, the quote, how did bankruptcies happen? Like gradually, then suddenly. Well, that's the same thing with defeat, with individuals or organizations that don't reorient, that aren't constantly reorienting and trying to improve their capacity for free and independent action. There could be a gradual decline, and then one that's instantaneous.
So Mark, as I listened to you, I mean, obviously the theories behind this are they're complex. The
Yeah.
readings that you're referring to, the people you're referring to, there's a great deal of complexity. At AGLX, how do you take that and make it crunchy, if you will, for the average business leader? Because what you're saying is absolutely dead on. And you and I, we've had the chance to speak before. We're very much of the same mind or thinking about, iterations and what we need to do. But how do you take all of this discussion and make it, again, crunchy, accessible for a CEO in his or her organization?
I'd say at the very beginning, there has to be the desire in earnest to improve. There has to be the belief that we could be doing better. There has to be the recognition, the introspection, the realization that we are not as good as we could be, and we could always be getting we always could be getting better. And that kind of conclusion, that kind of introspection, I think, comes from a lot of humility. Some of the best leaders that I know, and I've known through my entire career, be it military or the business world, have been the most humble, and they also take a very serious approach to lifelong learning. And a very serious approach to lifelong learning and encouraging that in the people that they inspire and influence within their organizations. That's how they adapt. That's how they teach adaptation. But if there's no desire to improve and do the work, it won't happen. You can look at the best athletes, you could look at the best coaches, you could look at the best business leaders. I mean, these are individuals that take a very serious approach to constantly improving their capacity for free and independent action, right? Constantly improving their craft. And with that comes the self-realization that I can get better and I want to get better. Thus, I will pursue and learn things that can help not only myself, but my teams around me get better. Whether maybe we'll incorporate a debriefing process in a
Right.
psychologically safe environment so that everybody's perspective can be understood and the client's perspective can be better understood. And we can uncover blind spots and mismatches that we weren't aware of. Maybe we'll do get an actual understanding of OODA and how it works. And maybe we're gonna talk about OODA. We're gonna talk about maybe the Kinevin framework, so we understand the things that we deal with, where they actually reside within volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous environments. Teaching leadership. Is leadership a role? Or is it a quality? And if it's a quality that we all have, then everybody on the team can learn it, and everybody at the team can be better. It doesn't necessarily mean that someone's no longer going to be responsible for everything. It just means that we're all going to be working together as we develop this quality in ourselves. But that comes with, I think, with humility and really a desire to improve. I mean, I can't think of any successful athlete that didn't want to get better, that didn't want to make progress, that didn't want to improve, because if they didn't do that, they would become obsolete, they become irrelevant. And sports is a really interesting place to look. And people say, I'm not into sports, but you could look at any sport. You could look at motorsport, you could look at ice hockey, you could look at football, anything. You can see where there is, once the desire to improve is lost, once the desire to work is lost, it's
Yeah.
it's a misorientation. For the competitor, that creates a massive mismatch. And maybe your competitors do take a humble approach to what they don't know and what they're uncertain about and what they're trying to figure out inside of because they understand that the markets that we're in or the sport that we're in or whatever, it's a complex, nonlinear, asymmetric environment. And we can drill and train and have and have heuristics and other things, and those are going to give us the freedom to adapt and to move as reality unfolds, because that reality as it unfolds is always going to be indeterminate. It's always going to be undefined. It's always going to be uncertain.
So what I really like in what you're saying is, yeah, it starts with desire, and it's going to take some work, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And I think that in today's world, we're looking for those drive-through purchases, those really easy ways to do something. And if you do want to become a company that lives and breathes leadership as you're speaking to it, and the ability to think differently, if you will, under pressure and uncertainty, yeah, it's going to take a little bit of effort.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's actually a very good thing.
Yeah, it's a mentor of mine, former commander that I had in the Marine Corps, he always liked to talk about the 3 Ds of orientation. How does our orientation change? And it kind of ties into what you were just talking about. So number one was drift. So my 47-year-old self, just through the passing of time, I see the world differently than my 17-year-old self. And I have a 17-year-old son, so I can see the gap and the understanding. But then I think about it that just my perspective has changed. I was born in 1976. I know what it's like to dial a rotary phone. I know what it's like to go out with people and not be able to text and not be able to spot their location and tell somebody to coordinate in another city at this time. I'm going to be at this street corner, and have to call my mother collect to find out where they were. I mean, I can understand all these things, and I can also understand, using this device, and it does literally everything. I can make movies with it. I can listen to music. I can watch movies. I can do business. I can do Zooms with you. I can do thousands of things that used to involve thousands of devices and equipment into
Yeah.
one thing. So that's drift. The other ones go hand in hand, and this is sort of the Boyd point, and this is sort of what we try to do when we show people. Disruption is the other D, and design. And I have to meet disruption with design. So if you're not my client, Ken, I have to disrupt wherever you're currently working with, and I have to meet that with the design of what it is that I offer to show you that alternative, to create that mismatch that you would come and work with me. It's a continuous, ongoing battle between disruption and design, or as Boyd would say, destruction and creation. Sun Tzu would say there's Chang movements and there's Chi movements. So there's conventional and the unconventional. It's a constant pull and push between the conventional and the unconventional. But that's how I would change that. I have to be willing to disrupt myself. I mentioned I'm a swimmer. When I got back into swimming about 5 years ago, I didn't just jump in the pool and was swimming, 2 or 3 miles like I can do. No, I could barely swim 500 yards the first time, and then I would tell myself, okay, I'm going to see if I can go 5 minutes without stopping. I'm going to see if I can go 10 minutes without stopping. Let me see if I can go 20 minutes without stopping, and constantly doing the work to get better. But that came with a lot of disruption. I'm an early riser. That's a disruptive activity. And then I meet that with design. What do? Well, I read something and then I head to the pool. Like it's met that self-disruption is met with design. Well, businesses are the same way, because these things are fractal. So we have to be willing to disrupt ourselves. We have to be willing to challenge our assumptions. We have to be willing to think that we don't know everything. And this is not as good as it gets. We're going to have to continue to build and improve it, because somebody else out there is going to try to do it if we don't do it, and somebody out there right now is trying to do it. And if we don't understand how this stuff works, how the process of improvement and challenging assumption works, then somebody else does. We're going to be in a lot of trouble. So.
Mark McGrath, Chief Learning Officer, AGLX. You work with companies and leaders and their teams to thrive in complex and uncertain environments. Our time has really gone by quickly this morning. And as it comes to an end, I want to ask you one more thing. And that goes to your podcast. You share it with Brian Rivera. It's called No Way Out. Tell me a little bit about it, how it got started, and why do you want me to listen?
So Ponch Rivera. So Ponch is his call sign. So he
Okay.
goes by Ponch, Brian or Ponch. But we both came to the same understanding of Boyd from very different paths. Mine was more of a sort of the Marine Corps sort of history, economics background. Brian's is very scientific, very into neuroscience, but we came to the same conclusions in our discussions of Boyd that started a few years ago. And then when we decided when I was able to come in and join AGLX, we wanted to have a podcast. And Brian and I were in the Boyd archives at Marine Corps University in Quantico, Virginia, where Boyd's archives are. So it's great that the Air Force doesn't have them. The Marine Corps got him because he was so influential. And there's another story about that we could do a whole show on. In fact, we did do a whole show on that, and you could tune in on No Way Out with the episode with G.I. Wilson. But the point is that we were trying to figure out what would we call it, and what would we call our podcast. And there was a legal pad, a document I've put up on my LinkedIn a picture of, and it said on the front, "No Way Out." And No Way Out was John Boyd's working title for his very famous brief, Conceptual Spiral. And Conceptual Spiral is also where I take the name for my Substack. And it's actually the same paragraph. So I took the name for the Substack, The World of Reorientation, where I just kind of do my Boyd thinking and get it out there as I talk about it, but also where we got the podcast name. It's the same paragraph, and it's basically saying that there's no way out. Like given all the things in the world, like uncertainty and entropy, imprecision, all these other things that were friction, all these other things that we're trying to work around. There's no way out of maintaining that whirl of reorientation to keep revising and updating our models, because if we don't do that, we become extinct. We can't adapt. We're going to die. So we built the podcast with that name, but as a place where we could continue to on one hand serve as a memorial to John Boyd, but not as a static ossified memorial to just be there's a term called fanboids. Not to just reduce it to that, to be a museum, but really to be a forum that we could pull people from all industries, from a wide array of scientific backgrounds and other things, to contribute to the work that John Boyd intentionally left open. All of this was to be in a state of becoming. All of this was to be open so that people like us could continue to develop the work and apply it. And learn how to get better with it, and kind of really see what it was that he was pursuing, because he was pursuing something that even his closest acolytes, they disagree on. There's some disagreement on what he was actually trying to do. But like, Ponch and I have talked about, really what he's doing is helping empower us as best we can with our faculties, with our neuroscience, and with our cognitive engine, really to deal with reality and thrive in it. And that's what the episodes are dedicated. That's what the show is dedicated to. So, if you go on the 50 plus shows that we've done, and we have more coming out, you'll notice that it's a wide variety of people and insights, and most of them have never been in the military, and some of them have never even heard of John Boyd. Yet at the same time, by practicing their craft and their science, or their academics, or their arts, or whatever it is, they've identified exactly the same things that Boyd was working on. So it's on Spotify, it's on iTunes. We have a YouTube channel as well. In fact, starting to do Twitter Spaces, so we're going to give that a shot and see if we can do some No Way Out live episodes and see how that goes. So.
Mark, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure. So many questions that I had that we didn't get to, so I hope you'll join us again.
Absolutely. Say when. I'll be happy to come back. John Boyd used to say that if he was going to give the full brief, he would need at least 6 hours. So we can do as many installments as you like.
Okay. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.